Alrighty guys, are you ready to continue nerding out with Call of Duty with me? So my first video, I talked about bullet velocity versus damage range, right? We kind of learned the difference between the two, which is better, what is more beneficial, right? Damage range or bullet velocity. And then that led to the comments stating, hey, remember what Exclusive Ace talked about with bullet velocity and hit scans. So I wanted to do a follow-up video to talk about how bullet velocity and hit scan are put together and well made, rather than bullet velocity being a natural distance travel starting from 0 meters. It's a hit scan based on the bullet velocity number that you have for the weapon. But now let's actually apply that to building a loadout. If you guys haven't watched those videos yet, I advise for you to watch those videos to kind of get a better grasp of what I'm going to be talking about, so you don't feel so lost in this video. But if you already know what damage range, bullet velocity is, and hit scan and all of that, great. Let's continue on. So we got KOT Angry here saying, Pure Noble, can you make the best bullet velocity build for the Kilo 141 and the Lodra SMG? So knowing about bullet velocity, damage range, and hit scan, let's see how we can build the Kilo 141 to the best of its ability. So first of all, let's talk about what the base stats is for the Kilo 141 and why it makes it a good gun in its own way. You already know, based on S4 Reloaded, right, they buffed the Kilo 141's bullet velocity. So without even adding any attachments, you're already looking at 900 meters a second for bullet velocity. That means your hit scan is already great, up to 45 to 50 meters. So if you are a Resurgence player, I would say this is already a good bullet velocity baseline to stay at. You don't necessarily have to add more, but if you do, say you're the type of player that takes fights past maybe 60 or 70 meters, kind of like in Big BR, great, you can add more bullet velocity. But let me tell you about something. Look at the damage at effective range and the damage beyond range. Your damage ranges for the damage drop off on the Kilo 141. The Kilo only has a max damage output up to 35 meters. So in essence, you don't necessarily have to keep adding bullet velocity, because what's the point of taking fights past the 35 meter mark? Even when you go up to 45 meters, you're already getting at 21 damage per shot. Very, very low damage. In essence, that is what the Kilo 141 is known for, that its weakness. It gives you great recoil control, great bullet velocity, but it does shoot a little soft. So when it comes to choosing your barrel for the Kilo 141, are you really going to get the gain twist barrel or the long range barrel? Because the gain twist is going to add 50% bullet velocity, which takes it up to 1300 meters, but it's already shooting pellets at 35 meters. What's the point of increasing the hit scan or that range of bullet velocity? I would choose the long barrel instead, because when you choose the long barrel, now your effective damage range goes up to 51 meters. So not only your baseline bullet velocity at 900 still hit scans at 45 to 50 meters, now your damage drop off will be after 50 meters. That means you're still going to have max damage output that matches with your hit scan on the Kilo 141. There is no point trying to add more bullet velocity to increase the hit scan range for this gun if your damage drop off is already happening at 35 meters. Now this is going to be a 5 attachment build, because in my opinion, you don't necessarily need 8 attachments for the weapon to be fully effective. I run Resurgence a lot. I like to run Overkill just because I want to get my primary and secondary weapon as fast as I could without needing to get a second loadout. Starting with the optic, it's going to be the Volsky Reflex. If you guys don't know, Volsky Reflex is commonly used by a lot of players. Why? Because it has the least amount of visual clutter for that attachment. It doesn't obstruct your left, right, top, or bottom peripheral view as much, or if anything, the least. We're gonna do a muzzle, but we're gonna do that after. Moving on to the magazine, you could go with extended mag 1 if you purely want to keep speed and movement, but going to extended mag 2 is not gonna make or break you. Your ADS increase is only about 7% and your sprint to fire speed is about 10%. But if you do go to that extended mag 3 and go with that giant 80 round drum, yeah, you're gonna be a little slow on that. I wouldn't recommend it. Now moving on, the rear grip, I want to do ergonomic grip. A lot of people like to use CQB, but I prefer using CQB for my SMGs just because I need more of that sprint to fire speed. I'm getting that up close engagement. But when I use ARs, majority of the time we're talking about positioning, we're talking about angle. I want to be the first person to aim down sight, so I'd rather go with ergonomic grip instead. So at this point, we are 2 attachments in. Okay, there's 2 ways that we can go about it. You could go into fire mods, you could go with recoil springs. Remember, we don't need to add NATO overpressured. We don't need that additional bullet velocity. We have enough. I would rather choose recoil springs, because now you essentially don't have to think when it comes to controlling recoil on this gun. Now you can go that route, but say, hey, maybe you do want to have that additional bullet velocity to bring your hit scan up to, instead of 45 meters, maybe 55 or 60 meters. You could totally do that. You can go with the NATO overpressured, or you can take it even a step further and double up with your muzzle, because with your muzzle, right? We can do a monolithic suppressor. You'll get the benefits of added bullet velocity, but also having a suppressed weapon to hide yourself on the map. But for me, as a Resurgence player, I would sacrifice that muzzle to do the recoil springs instead. I don't need to have that suppressor because there are so many different sound cues to reveal yourself in Resurgence that going silent on a map that small with that much action, there really is no point. But yeah, that's gonna be my build, guys. We're gonna go with the damage range barrel. We're gonna have the Volsky reflex. We got the extended mag 2. We got the ergonomic grip, and then we also have the recoil springs mod for this Kilo 141 build. Alright, so moving on to the Ladra build. Now let's look at the base stats again for this weapon. You're looking at bullet velocity being at 515. According to Exclusive Ace, that's only going to be a 25 meter hit scan. But look at its damage drop off though. It's already dropping off at 12 meters. There is no point to have a hit scan higher than 25 meters because your damage drop off point is going to be half of that anyway. So again, in my opinion, what I would do is I would go with the long range barrel. Why? Because at least if your hit scan is going to be up to 25 meters, your damage effective range is going to be closer to 25 meters instead, or at least up to. That way you have max damage output at a longer range. But even then, guys, think about your SMG fights. You rarely take your SMG fights past 30 meters. So anything above 25, you don't necessarily need to have for bullet velocity. So the next 4 attachments we're going to be adding for the Lodra is the magazine. We're going to go with the extended mag 2. And then from there, rear grip. Remember what I said about ARs and SMGs, the difference with the grips? Since we're using an SMG, we're going to go with the CQB grip instead. I want to have that sprint to fire speed. So there's 2 things you need to learn about the Lodra, is that the Lodra was not meant to be a movement gun. So going with a stock, I would not need to, because we already have that sprint to fire speed I need with the CQB. Having a stock is not going to add that additional speed. Another thing you need to learn about the Lodra is that the initial recoil when you shoot that gun is very small, very easy to control, but the continued rate of fire does increase the recoil exponentially. So what I recommend you can do for the last 2 attachments is for the underbarrel, you could go with the G grip. That's going to give you horizontal control and additional recoil stabilization. So what that means is as the Lodra keeps shooting, even though the recoil is getting worse, the G grip underbarrel attachment is going to control that additional rising recoil. And then for the last one, it's a preference, and I'm going to show you later in the firing range, is that with the muzzle, you could go with the compensator for that additional vertical recoil control, or you could go with the monolithic suppressor, not for the additional bullet velocity benefit, but the sheer fact that when you shoot this gun off, you're gonna see a lot of huge visual recoil with its flash. I'd rather use the monolithic suppressor, get the benefit of bullet velocity, but hide that flash. Alright, so here's the Kilo 141. Remember, the Kilo already has great recoil. That is why you don't have to add additional recoil attachment. But like I said, remember, there's no point adding additional bullet velocity. This is probably going to be good for you in the short run. If you want, you could run the 2x or 3x. It's going to give you that additional gun kick control. But remember, when you tend to run 2x or 3x, you're going to push your fights fairly far. Remember, your effective damage output for the Kilo 141 is at most 50 meters. So you don't have to take the fights farther than that if you want max damage output. Alright, now moving on to the Lodra SMG. So this is what I mean. You could go with the compensator for your muzzle. It's going to give you great recoil control. Take it. But what do you notice here? What do you notice? What I notice is a lot of visual flash. So take that bad boy out, put on your monolithic suppressor. Now that you have the monolithic suppressor on, it's going to reduce that flash. So it's going to be easier looking at your target. So imagine having to trace your targets at a distance. It's going to be a lot more easier to see. But yeah, KOT, try that out. If you like the build, great. If not, and you think you have a better build, that is awesome. Go with the build that works best for you. But if anything, guys, that is all I have for this video. If you did enjoy the video, please drop a like on it. It helps it tremendously to get in front of more people. And if you do like the content overall, drop a sub to the channel. We'd love to see you here for the next video, okay? As always, stay pure, stay noble, and hashtag bring back honest gaming. Later, guys.